And close the eyes. Take this opportunity to reconnect with yourself again. Always reconnecting. And take this moment to acknowledge the connection that you share with all that is. All the other beings, all of this beautiful creation. And also take this moment to be inspired by that divinity, which is the substratum, the foundation, the essence and the cause of this manifested universe. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Taking a breath in. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jyestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrinvanu Tibasita Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Birvajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujushana Kritachi Shagmam Novacha Mushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And gently releasing the hands and fluttering the eyes open. Welcome. Good to see you all today. So I thought today we would talk about what works, what doesn't work, and why. And that's a big subject because it could be anything that we're talking about. But I thought the stories, excuse me, about the stories, versus the mindfulness and the presence, and which one works, which one doesn't work, and why. So, I'm going to cough. Allergies. My cats don't know whether to shed or not shed. Could you get me a little cup of water? Thank you, Cindy. So what's wrong with stories? We all have them, don't we? Yeah. We have stories about our childhood, stories about our modern day, stories about other people. Are stories bad? I'm so sorry. You ever cough so much your eye waters? Yeah. Oh. Thank you. Goodness. Wow, thank you, love. My story, I have allergies. And the reason that doesn't work for me is because I don't take precautions. I just go with whatever is happening, and I guess pray for the best. But this morning is not going to have it. So at any rate, all right, back to our topic now. So I'm sure you've all seen or read the original Sleeping Beauty. What happens in Sleeping Beauty?
She gets kissed by the prince.
Mm-hmm. And really the whole story is about him kissing her and then rescuing her, taking her, and her being, his wife and partner for the rest of her life. So that's a fictional tale that has other endings also. Right? So in the more modern day, so sorry. Oh my gosh. In the more modern day, they've rewritten the ending. And they've actually rewritten the whole story. They've made it into a musical. And they made it where it wasn't the prince that needed to kiss her. It was something else that needed to happen, And so the problem with stories is that they're very much at our whim. They're very much at our whim. But the reality is that initial Sleeping Beauty, that first telling of Sleeping Beauty that has been so popular for all of these years, has also left an impression upon us. It's left an impression that the princess needs to be kissed. It's left an impression that the prince has a more important role to play than Sleeping Beauty does. And I'm sure that there's a male counterpart to that too. It's also left the impression, right, that the man has to do the saving. So this is the problem with our stories, is that number one, they're fickle. Because, they can just kind of be changed at our whim, should we choose to. And number two, even if they are changeable, they've still left an impression. And that impression becomes another story. As we try to walk through life, making sense of life, living the experiences that we have based on these impressions of the past and the ones that we're reinforcing today. So for those two reasons alone, the story doesn't work. The egoic story does not work. The story of loss or gain, the story of drama or boredom, which is in and of itself a drama, no matter what the story is, we're always going to find the pit hole, the slippery slope of the impression that it leaves behind and its fickle nature. So it leaves this, and that's like, they're diametrically opposed to one another. It leaves a strong impression that we end up adopting as some kind of a truth to ourselves. But then it's also fickle because, one day you can have a vengeful feeling towards somebody. And you can use an experience, you can tell the story over and over and over to yourself about that person in order to continue the impression of your justification for how you feel about them. And then somebody else makes you angry, and now you have this common enemy with that person, and suddenly you change your mind because it's convenient. So now your vengeance is not against that person, it's against this other person, and now that person is, your BFF. Or at least an ally. So the story that we tell ourselves is always changeable, on a whim, depending upon what it is that our ego wants in a moment. Do we want an ally or do we want an enemy? Do we want to be kissed or do we want to be, the drama of the breakup? Do we want wealth? Do we want poverty? What do we want? And that's the way that we're going to interpret things. We're going to use every story that we've ever heard, that has ever applied to us, in a way that's going to answer what the ego is seeking right now. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. We don't just seek good things in this life. We don't just seek peace. We don't just seek out love. We don't just seek out unity. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. We actually, most of the time, are seeking out those things that are harmful and hurtful. Those things that hurt us and those people around us. Those things that separate us. Those things that make it even more difficult for us to see the truth of unity. Those are the things that we actually seek out. We seek out the complaining. We seek out the drama. Why we do that is an interesting complexity. In part, it's enculturation. It's the way we've been raised also. It's what we've been told. And how we are expected to behave, that we go with the norms of society rather than against them. And in large part, that type of training, that type of life training, makes it very difficult for us to have an alternate worldview. But no matter how deeply embedded our life training is, the heart is still always calling to us. And the heart isn't calling to us to adopt a new story. The heart is calling to us to see the truth. That's huge. The heart is saying, close the book. Stop reading all of the verbs and the action words and all the other stuff, the drama, and just see the truth. And in that regard, the truth will tell you everything you need to know. And that's what works. The closer that we come to the truth, the closer we come to ourself, capital S self, the closer we come to honoring, to witnessing, to seeing, to holding space for the self and all others as well. And then ultimately, the more aligned we are with truth, the closer we come to having a genuine relationship with the sacred versus one that just fits into a story, whatever story it happens to be that we're telling ourselves today. So the stories don't work for us. The truth works. But we turn our back on the truth constantly. Why do we turn our back on the truth? Because it's uncomfortable. Because people tell us to. Because we don't want to be different. Because we're afraid. We turn our back on the truth because it's not known to us. Or at least we think it's not known to us. And the unknown is very scary. I remember years ago, I made a vow to myself. I said, every year for the rest of my life, I'm going to do at least one, maybe two things new, different, that I've never done before. So the first year, I learned how to scuba dive. And, I love the water. I was raised at the Jersey Shore, so, back when it actually was the Jersey Shore prior to MTV. And, yeah, that's not the Jersey Shore. And I love the water and I love the ocean. But this scuba diving school that I signed up with, they brought us to the inlet to teach us the scuba diving. First we did it in the pool, and then they brought us down to the Manasquan Inlet. And if any of you have ever been in that area, you know that it's brackish water. It's very dark water. And you can't see this in front of your face. So you're going down into, an abyss that's probably 5 feet deep at the most. But it feels like it's an eternal abyss because you can't see anything. And you're breathing on this respirator device thing, And it was both a terrifying and a pretty interesting experience. Needless to say, I don't scuba dive, I snorkel. And I don't know that had anything to do with it. I think maybe it's just opportunistic, but I do prefer snorkeling for sure. But the point of sharing that with you is to say that the truth is like that. The truth is the unknown. And why is it unknown to us is because we haven't lived it. We haven't put on the respirator and put on our wetsuit and dove in to the waters of the truth. So how do we know what's there? And we don't like that. We don't like not having some idea. We often run a YTT, a yoga teacher training course here. And it's so interesting because so many students have the same question early on. They come up and they say, I feel like things are changing and I don't know who I'm going to be when that's done. And it scares me. And I say, well, why are you scared? Are you becoming an axe murderer? And they're like, oh, no. I don't want to go to the bar. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste my time on certain things. They say, why are you afraid of that? I say, I don't know, but it terrifies me because I don't know who I am without that. I say, well, there's only one way to find out. Do it. Find out who you are without all of that. Who are you without your stories? It's worth asking. I already know the answer. It's a really great answer. It's a wonderful discovery. It's not one that you'll have and then it'll always be there. It's an experience that you'll have for a moment. And then something else will irritate and the whole thing starts over again. But that little glimpse that you do catch into the truth of yourself becomes an inspiration. Then all of a sudden, or it's either an inspiration or it becomes, it substantiates your fear. Depends upon how you wish to see it. Are you going to apply the story to it, or are you just going to let it be what it is? So if you apply your stories to it, then you'll turn away from it rather quickly. And claim, well, it didn't work after all. It wasn't for me. This is funny too, because a lot of times, some students will say this. They'll be like, "Yeah, I tried that whole thing. It wasn't for me." How is it not for you? It is you, So what you're basically saying is, I have no need to know myself. Thank you. I like the ignorance better, But we all say that to some degree at some point in time. We turn away from it because it's just easier. But this truth of ourself, it opens up to us in little bits and pieces, and they only last for a little while, and then we forget again. And then we go back to the story. But the more that we remain open to the possibility of becoming, or of revealing, whatever word you want to put there, none of them are adequate. The more we remain open to the possibility of that, the less satisfying the story is. The more of an ache takes over. And the ache is, there's something you're forgetting. There's something you're forgetting. You're not looking in the right direction. The heart is sending this message to you. Because the heart wants to go home to the truth. The head wants the story. The heart says, just be you. No, not the you that fits this definition or this definition. That's not you. That's your body. And your body is like your car. It's not who you really are. Your body is just something that's carrying you around, like your car carries you around. And a couple of years ago, I had a wonderful little green-colored Honda Element. Oh, I loved that car. It was so wonderful. And then my son needed a car, so I gave him my Honda Element, and then I went out and I got a different car. I got a Honda Ridgeline, I think it was. I was like, well, I'm going to try the pickup thing. Didn't last very long. Brought it back and traded it for the CRV. And the CRV was pretty nice, but then my daughter needed a car. So then I gave her that, and I got a Subaru. Yeah? Well, this body that is carrying you around, when you were a baby, it was this big, And then when you were a little child, it was like, from here on up, always changing. Arms a little longer, legs a little longer, cheeks a little less chubby or a little more chubby. Things changing all the time, And then as a teenager, this tall or however, and differences in the body yet again, and then middle age, and then, senior age, and the hair is gray, and things are changing still, right? So it's just like that. It's just like that. There's no truth there. The only truth that we might find in the body is the relationship of the experience that we have with regard to our sense of ownership over it. So what I mean by that is this. Almost 2 years ago now, I had an accident, most of you know, crushed the top of my tibia. And so I had to go and have corrective surgery done to it. And I was in a wheelchair for several months. I was not allowed to walk. So I had to sit in the wheelchair with my leg elevated, keep it completely still, couldn't do anything, right? And in that time, it could have been looking at that and thinking, I'll never be the same, right? When something comes to us by way of ailment, that's the first thing we usually think, I will never be the same. That wasn't the first thought I had. The first thought I had was actually, okay, cool, I need some downtime. It's good, it's painful, but it's just another opportunity to balance life. Because if it's not a broken leg, then maybe it's a concussion, or maybe it's a new job, or maybe it's an end of a relationship, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a party. There's always something changing in life. But we take ownership over it, and we say, well, this is my broken knee, and because it's my broken knee, it means that I own that, and it defines me. It becomes my story. I use it a lot as an example, but I don't feel that it defines me in any way, shape, or form, because this body is not me. This body is simply my vehicle. And that's what's taught in the teachings of yoga, in the Shivastakam, beautiful, beautiful mantra. I am not this body. I am not this mind. I am not the five senses. I'm not the prana that flows through the body. I'm none of these things. What am I? I'm Shiva. I'm bliss, absolute. I'm consciousness. That's what I am. The rest of it is stuff. Stuff that changes, like the stories change, But the more that we explore, what does it mean I am Shiva? What is that? Because that statement is truth. Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am Shiva. That statement is truth. What does that statement mean? Now, we get into a slippery slope there, because the moment that we try to define it, we're creating a story for ourselves, right? So rather than trying to define it, although it can be helpful in certain instances, just be it. Just be it. Just recognize when it's the story versus presence. When it's the story versus witnessing. When it's the story versus holding space with care and compassion and indifference. And I don't mean indifference to be the bad word that society tells us it is. What I mean is, if you need something and I have the capacity to support you and it's the right moment to do so, then why not? Why not? Rather than the mind saying, well, I don't know. Should I? Should I not? What are the pros? What are the cons? Let me get out my little list and I'll write it all down and see which column is bigger, and we make it a story. We make it a story. But when we are abiding more and more within the self, we let go of the story and we just exist. We exist. We exist with the healthy body, the healthy mind, the unhealthy mind. And we don't have a problem acknowledging that the mind is most often not healthy. We talk to somebody. I had a student one time, one of her earlier visits, way back in the day, to a satsang, and I was talking about ignorance that day. And at the end of it, she came up to me and she said, I don't like that you use that word. And I said, what word? And she said, well, that ignorant word. She said, I'm not ignorant. And I looked at her and I said, well, you shouldn't take it personally. It's not meant to be a personal insult, but the reality is we're all ignorant. And she went, no, I'm not. I'm not stupid. I said, I didn't say you were stupid. That's not at all what I said. Ignorant Look it up in the dictionary. It means to ignore. To ignore. So if we're ignorant, we're ignoring. And we all ignore. I mean, come on. Every single one of us does. No matter who we are. In the human condition, we ignore. And what do we ignore? We ignore the truth. And what do we favor? The story. Because the story is easily changeable to the whims of the ego. The truth is not at all changeable. Yeah. So what happens with the story besides these impressions that the story leaves is that it limits us greatly. Because if I tell myself in my story, well, I'm a superhero, then I can never be ordinary. I can't sleep at night. Then I'll never look at nighttime as a restful time. All I ever do is get mad. Then I'll have a very difficult time experiencing happiness or contentment or calm. So one of the big problems with the story is that it limits us. It limits us. Whereas abiding in the truth allows. It allows. It doesn't allow for bad behavior because an individual who abides in the truth has no need for poor behavior. Poor behavior is the result of insecurity based on the story that we're telling ourselves in a moment. The truth lends itself to love. And not necessarily, but at first, yes, but in the ultimate, not necessarily human love, but divine love. Divine love, the acknowledgement that we're all connected and that your well-being is inherently tied in to the well-being of all beings, just like mine is. And so if I hurt you, I'm hurting all of us. And if I support you, I'm supporting all of us. If I take advantage of you, I'm taking advantage of all of us. If I'm too lenient with you, I'm too lenient with all of us. You see it? Yeah. When we are abiding in the truth, we don't need to be involved in that. When the heart is at peace, you know what the right behavior is. And by right behavior, I mean that which is not harming. It doesn't give too much or take too much. It doesn't offer what is not needed. It doesn't take what doesn't belong. It doesn't take offense. It understands what is owned and what isn't. A lot of times individuals will say to me, well, how do I pursue this peaceful life? And I said, well, the first thing that you need to do is come to an understanding of what belongs to you and what doesn't. We're all caught up in the story that it all belongs to me. It's mine. Mine, mine, mine. What cartoon was that? Mine, 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 mine. The little seagull running around. Mine, 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 mine. That's us. Everything belongs to us. And all the problems that come with it, too. But interestingly, science did some kind of a research study back in like the 80s or 90s. And they said, and I oftentimes soften it and say like 95%, but it's actually 100%. 100% of everything will solve itself without you. What a humbling reality, But the story says, no, nothing can resolve itself without me. I have to have a say. I have to fix it. I have to do something. I have to be the one. I have to show the way, give the most, be the most. And it's like, no, it will resolve itself without you. It will resolve itself without you. Now, I'm not saying don't get involved in the support end of things. What I am saying is the truth lends itself to a sense of humility so that we don't think, like, I'm the only one who can make a difference. We can be humble in what it is that we choose to do. And we can acknowledge that if an individual is hungry, feed them. If an individual needs shelter and you have the capacity, then support them somehow. If an individual is seeking forgiveness and you have the capacity, forgive them. It doesn't do anything to you to forgive other people. It doesn't limit you in some way, shape, or form. But the story says, oh yes, it does. It makes me vulnerable. No, it doesn't. Because no one ever said that if you forgive somebody, you have to go up to them and be their BFF. No one said you have to throw your arms around and give them a big, big, big hug and make yourself vulnerable. Nobody ever said that. Forgiveness has nothing to do with being in the same proximity with a person who harmed you. That has nothing to do with it. Nothing. It doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life. It doesn't mean any of that. Forgiveness is acknowledging something happened and it made me mad, angry. But if I'm going to be really honest with myself about it, there's a couple of things that I need to know. Number one, it happened in the past, and we all have a tendency to remember details differently. So there might have been a little part that I'm ignoring, like the part that I played. And then the second thing is, in addition to our oftentimes not complete memory, is to say that while we have to, psychologically speaking, for our psychological health, work through the different stages of anger and grief and whatnot, there comes a point in time where it becomes violent. The only thing that we can say about another person is how horrible they are. The only thing that we can look for another person is something bad to happen to them so that they get some kind of payback for what we feel they did to us. That becomes a violence in and of itself. It is a karma that will have to be reconciled at some point in this life or some future life. And spiritually speaking, we're not here to collect more karma. We're here to reconcile what we can reconcile. We will collect, of course we will, because we're living. But why not minimize what is unnecessary? Like the unnecessary suffering that we all go through. Why not minimize that? And say, I don't need to carry this burden right now. I don't. I don't need to wish that person ill. I don't need to gossip about the other person. I don't need to attach myself so much to the story. I know it sounds easy maybe, or maybe it sounds like rose-colored glasses, or to some it sounds like spiritual bypassing. It's not spiritual bypassing, because you're not just throwing down this experience and walking away from it as if nothing happened. You have to do your work. You have to. Otherwise, how do you ever reclaim your own wholeness? How do you reclaim your own heart if you're not willing to do the work? So it's not bypassing. We're not, ignoring, right? We're not being ignorant, at least not fully. What we're saying is, there's something happening here. I'm angry. I'm having these thoughts, these impressions. I really, am super pissed at this person. I'm having a difficult time wishing them anything but ill. And I recognize that that's not healthy. It's not healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. And what my heart is asking me to do is to move into a different phase of this process, something closer to forgiveness. I need to figure out how to get there, how to do that. And you want to know something? It's so easy, it's so simple, the first step, because the first step is simply acknowledging it without justification. Well, yeah, I do have these feelings about this person, but no justification. You have these feelings. These feelings are upon you. I love in Ireland, they don't say, I am depressed. They say, depression is upon me. Like it's something that's sitting on your shoulder, rather than something that you are. So you have these thoughts. They come to you. Just acknowledge it. That's all you have to do. And then once you take away the burden of the guilt that's felt over feeling bad feelings toward another person, once you're able to alleviate a little bit of that, then a big space opens up within. And that space is the space to do the deeper work. And then the next step is self-responsibility. Well, yes, so this person behaved very poorly in whatever it was that they did. Now, what role did I play in that? And that's not a guilt thing. That's not victimizing the victim. That's not what I'm talking about. Because maybe something happened, and as a result of what happened, you hated yourself. And you covered that up by saying that you were hating someone else. You blamed yourself, but you never acknowledged it because you were too ashamed. Those are the things. We have to look at them and say, this is the role that I am playing in this. Is that I actually blame myself, right, wrong, or indifferent. But I don't want to acknowledge that because I have pride. So instead, I'm just going to keep calling that person out for whatever I can call them out for. So that I can move the attention away from me in that one little regard, not taking ownership over one's own shame, and put that attention over on them. Does that make sense? Yeah. We all do it. Everybody does it. Nobody is exempt. Nobody is exempt. But the more that you recognize it and you acknowledge it and you accept it, the less of a story it is. The story is not going to fully go away. As long as we're living in this embodiment, we're going to have stories. It's actually part of our humanity is to have stories, But we've misused them over the years. I had a great professor when I was at Rutgers University, Dr. Harris. And one of the articles that Dr. Harris wrote was how the discovery of fire was, number one, an accident, and number two, became a useful tool to human beings for storytelling. Yeah. And the stories that they would tell around the fire weren't stories of, what that person did wrong, what that person did wrong, what that person did wrong. I don't know where we came into that, as being our primary story was about what everybody else is doing wrong. What the stories were around the fire were the stories of unity, the stories of the hunting party, and how they worked together to feed the community. And they were stories of goodness. And some later became stories of warfare and battle between tribes and things like that. But initially, that's not what it was. Initially, it was about coming together. So our stories do have that ability to them. But the problem is the condition of the ego. And if the ego is in a sick state, which it's often unhealthy, then we're going to take the story and twist it, depending upon what the ego is looking for. This tickle in my throat. That'll be a moment to say any questions or reflections. Yes, Lena.
As you were explaining this, I'm thinking, this is really complicated. Because it's like the onion almost. Like, you take off this layer, then you take off this layer. And I'm, as you're explaining it, I'm thinking, well, when you started out with the truth. Well, to get to that truth, I'm thinking, well, how do you really dissect this so that you know that you're looking at the truth and that you're looking, at yourself appropriately, the situation appropriately, and maybe how others are involved in that story that you're trying to peel back so that you can accurately see what the truth is. So my takeaway is complicated.
It's very complicated. And I suppose that, one of the most straightforward, I guess, answers to that would be, in my interactions with anybody, I recognize I remind myself to recognize that whatever impression I am having is a story. Whether I like the person, I don't like the person, I'm talking in my mind about what they're wearing or what they're saying, it's all a story. And when I remember to remind myself that those impressions are part of a story, it supports me in holding a greater space, in just allowing that person to be whoever they are. This works very well with my children. Particularly both of them. I was going to say my son, and I was like, no, both. Definitely both. Is that, the story Story A, they're my children. Story B, they were teenagers at one point. Story C, as teenagers, they were teenagers and they did teenagery things. Story, D, teenagers never really grow up in the eyes of the parent. They just keep committing the same mistakes. So these are all stories. So when I'm talking with one of my kids and I hear them saying something or presenting something that sounds very familiar to me, I immediately go to that place and say, don't attach to a story. You're attaching to a story, so hold space. Don't attach to the story. And so in that regard, and in a healthy way, it allows them to be the person or people that they are, and then I can enjoy their company more, and I can enjoy just being around them more. And there are times where there's cautions and we need to heed those cautions. But how many times do we heed cautions about people that we feel? We create a story around it. We call ourselves an empath. Wait, that's a whole nother conversation. We call ourselves an empath. We say, I'm super sensitive to people, and there's nothing I can do about it, and that person is just an emotional vampire and keeps taking and taking and taking. And it's like, do you see how much you're limiting yourself when you say something like that to yourself? Because you're on the one hand, you're saying that you understand that this relationship with this person is not healthy. And on the other hand, you're blaming your own ability to understand that in order to victimize yourself to stay in that situation. Does that make sense? Does it? Yeah. It's crazy. It really is, but it's complicated. It's so complicated. So it's just little baby steps. And I think that the fun part about it all is that as we acknowledge, try it on somebody, right? You'll see, try it on somebody. As we acknowledge that our relationship with other people is largely, if not completely, based on stories. And so, there's the camp over here, which are the ones that I love. There's the camp over here, the ones I like. You too, huh?
Yeah, we just started.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I wonder if they're burning something in the kitchen. I don't know. Or maybe incense somewhere in the building. It's just like a little tickle right there. This camp over here are people that I like. This camp over here, people I'm indifferent to. This camp over here, people I do not like. And so we break people up into these camps based on these stories. And how do we know? Somebody over here might actually belong over here. But they'll never make their way over because we won't let them. We'll limit ourselves in that regard. We'll say, you have no potential with me. You have no potential. I'm not even going to entertain the idea that you might be a worthwhile human being. What atrocities have happened over the history of humanity because of that type of thinking, Such atrocities. And in our own day-to-day living as well. So as best we can, just acknowledge to yourself whenever you feel a reaction coming, whether it is a reaction that is uncomfortable by way of negative thinking, negative feeling, but also positive, or what we would call positive, exciting. We'll use that word. Even exciting. Right? So we meet somebody and all of a sudden, this is the person. I'm going to marry this person. I'm going to have this person. I'm going to go after this person. They're going to love me. They're going to fix me. They're going to make me happy. It's a story. And the moment that you think that about somebody, you will never come to know the person that they are. because you're too invested in the story of them making you happy. If that's the story we're invested in, then how can we ever actually be with somebody just as they are? So just a little bit of acknowledgement along the way, and just investigate. Don't take my word for it. You have to do it. Investigate how it changes your relationships and your perspective about relationships. And what you'll probably find is that you've been carrying a lot on your shoulders. A lot of grief, a lot of sadness, a lot of doubt, a lot of disappointment, so much. And it's not for the reasons that you think. It's because of the constant battle that goes on between the heart and the head. A constant battle that is so fatiguing. Because the heart, she whispers, the heart says, just love. Stop with the stories. And the head says, or the ego says, the story. And it shouts it, And we hear the whisper. But the shout gets our attention. Eventually to the point that we just think the whisper is our imagination. Sacred love, divine love, all this rose-colored glass, oneness, unity, blah, 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 unicorns and, all that type of stuff, sparkles and whatnot. And so we think that way about, we start to say, it's not possible. It's just a bunch of wishy-washy, wellness people who can't fight their way out of a paper bag, right? This is the way society looks at most people who want to live a life of peace. But the reality is that if you start investigating what that life of peace actually is, you'll see the futility in living the other way. You'll see that the way that we've been living doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not going to bring you happiness. It's not going to bring you peace. As long as you are engulfed in the different camps, I like you, I don't like you. I love you, I hate you. I want you, I avoid you. Any of the stories, as long as that's your primary mode of understanding, peace and lasting happiness cannot be had. So take away a little bit of the story and get a little bit of peace. Take away a little bit more of the story and experience a little bit of happiness. Take away a little bit more of the story. Discover a little bit more contentment. Take away a little bit more of the story. Discover a little bit of relief. Little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. But as our very wise grandparents probably said, and great-grandparents, a little bit over a long period of time adds up to a whole lot. So in this lifetime, you can know a good depth of peace, a great expanse of happiness, a deeper joy, and you can walk through life with a lot less burden on your shoulders. You just have to let go of the stories that are meaningless, the ones that don't even matter. The ones that are hard stories, don't let go of those. Like the stories that appear to have great importance to them, that has to have some work around it. So don't just throw every story out or think you are throwing every story out into the trash can. No. Throw the ones out that are silly. The ones out that are like, why am I still carrying this story? That happened when I was 16, Still talking about some silly little thing that happened back in the day. Little stories, let those go first and see what happens there. And then do the work around the more difficult stories so that you can see them with greater clarity and draw the pieces out that are actually supportive for you and then put the ones away that aren't. Does that all make sense? Yeah. Let me do a time check. I feel like I spent half of the session coughing. I'm so sorry. I am. I know I should stop saying I'm sorry, but It's just allergies, so please know that. I would not be sitting here in front of
Outside a
you.
lot.
I've been outside so much. I had my first tick of the season. It wasn't embedded, it was just crawling up my shirt. I looked down and I was like, no. The story came in. See, now that's a time when a story is a little bit useful, right? There's the story of Lyme disease, and I do not wish to take part in that story anymore, so you must find another home. Yeah. And so you pick and choose things in this life. And I guess the key is to know a little bit about what it is that you're picking and choosing, and a little bit about what it is that you're not. Yeah. Any questions or reflections? Yes.
So I have a reflection and then I have a question.
Sure.
So, just recently in my own journey, discovery, right, just seeing how much violence we do to ourselves and to others to fit in, right? Like the stories of like what it looks to fit into this society. That's just a reflection, and as with all reflections, it can go on. But the question, the inquiry that I'm very deep in right now, my daughter is 25, she's extraordinary, and she feels very passionately about, and very concerned, and very committed, and very angry about what's happening as far as what she would call the Palestinian genocide. And she would point to that I'm ignorant, that I'm ignoring what is happening. And there is a facet where, in terms of choosing where I put my attention, I have not put a lot of attention there. And in just, discovering some of the things that are happening, and I also know that Israeli people are suffering. There's just so much suffering that is occurring. And back to, you were saying, like, not in difference, and yet where can you make a difference? And it's going to resolve itself without you. And right, so I'm finding my way, and like, what does it look like to hold the full spectrum and honor how I want to show up as a vibration and frequency, just because I know that if I take in a lot of media and really witness the suffering that is happening, my frequency just plummets. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that query.
So there's so many different things that I could say on that. The first is that we humans can take part in such atrocious behavior, and we do regularly. And it's very sad and it's very unfortunate, and there's always loss of innocent bystanders and violence committed against them. And you would think we would learn by now. We've only been here for how many millions of years? But the reality is that violence is an addiction. It is an addiction. I just want to back up for a moment and say that indifference is talked about differently by a lot of teachers. Some teachers say you should walk through the world as if you don't see anything. I don't agree with that. Other teachers say you should be indifferent to the wicked. And I agree with that on a level. Absolutely. That type of indifference is not, I don't care what you're doing. That's not what it is. It's, I will not contribute to what you're doing. And so when it comes to world events, what's happening in Palestine is nothing new. What's happening is nothing new. You look at the 1980s and the ethnic cleansing that happened in Africa. Look at what's happening right now with Russia. Look what happened here in the United States with the indigenous populations when this thing we call a nation was first stumbled upon, we'll say. this is the way of societies historically. Does it mean that we should be oblivious to it or not pay attention to it? No. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention to it. But what can you do? What can you do? And my suggestion is that if your attention to something that is happening on the other side of the world is taking you away from addressing what needs your addressing here, now, then that is another distraction. If it is not prompting you to be a better person in your own relationships, to contribute more magnanimously to your own community, right where you live, within your own family, then the rage that one feels at seeing something like that is a fear-based rage versus an outrage over injustice. And I'm not saying that that's your I'm just saying that these are things that we can think about. That we witness these atrocities, whether we want to or not. We do witness them. And then we make a choice to either dive into it and become involved somehow, or to turn away from it and not become involved. If we become involved, what does that mean? Why are we becoming involved? And that's a whole, that's a whole psychological thing. Why are we becoming involved? If we're becoming involved because we don't know what to do with our anger, and that's all we can talk about is how angry we are about that, and yet we still have these broken relationships in our everyday life, people that we're still stepping on, people that we're still hurting, hungry animals who live on our street, the cat next door, who's feral and has kittens and doesn't have enough food, and the little kittens have fleas all over them, and because they live in a broken down old condemned building, and we just look at that and say, that's not worth my time. There's an imbalance there. So my suggestion, and it's hard because we want to go and fix. We want to go and feed. We want to go and make it stop. But are you going to be able to? You cannot walk food across the lines over there. They're not going to let you. You can't go there. But what you can do is be here. And you can establish here the kind of world that you want to grow and encompass what's happening there. That you want to influence, I should say, what's happening there. We don't build a community here so that we can put walls up and say nobody from out there is allowed here. We build the kind of reality, or we try, here that we want for everybody, everywhere. And then if we have some extra money, we donate it to organizations that we know do a good job. Like, Doctors Without Borders is a wonderful one. There's a lot of organizations on the ground over there that are working to get food to people. And so you do what you can. But you do your work. Because what that is evidence of is the fact that work is not being done by the majority of the human species. If it was, that atrocity would not be happening. So let it be an inspiration to do your work even more deeply. And in whatever way you find is appropriate to you, if there's something that you can do, then do it. If you can, do a fundraiser. And so back when they had the floods, I guess it was it the floods or the fires in Texas? I think it was the floods, right? Didn't they have floods? There's so many things environmentally happening in this country, I can't even keep them straight anymore. I think it was the floods. that were inundated. And so many of the animal shelters were suffering as a result. And so I really wanted to put together, a food drive for the animals for some of the shelters down there. But you can't get to the shelters. There's no way to get the food to them because nobody's allowed to go there because it's not safe. And so you've got these little communities who are trying to support what is needed. So think about what it is that you're trying to do, and then pick something that has utility to it, either now or in the future. And so instead what I did was I did a monetary drive. A monetary drive to support them in the future, because there's not much that I can do to support them right now. And perhaps that's the issue, isn't it? That's where the guilt comes from. There's not much I can do right now. So I'm just going to be mad about it. I'm going to be angry about it. These people who can do something should do something. But the circumstance that's happening over there and in many other parts of the world is bigger than just a few people. It's been going on for so long that it's going to take a lot more than, a few well-minded politicians to bring an end to it. People say, if our government would step up and do something, then it would stop. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. Ethnic cleansing hasn't stopped anywhere in this world. Has it? No, it goes on till today. So even if the U.S. were to step in, could they make a difference? Possibly. But I also remember, where was that? I don't remember what country it was. Was it Turkey? There was some genocidal things going on, and they were bringing food in. I guess it was the Red Cross and a couple of other organizations were bringing food in for refugees, and it was all stolen at the border, and the refugees never got it. Because there's always somebody working against peace. There's always somebody working against peace. There's not enough people working for it. But if you want to establish peace, then you have to establish it where you are first. And then let it lend itself to a larger movement. And again, I'm not saying, don't get involved. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, do get involved, but get involved inward. And then let that lead you to what it is that's appropriate action for yourself. I know that took a few moments. That was a lot. There's a lot of other things, too, that could be said to that. But if it causes any kind of a rift between you and your daughter, try not to let that happen. Because her anger is fear. Her anger is, if it happened there, it could happen here. And you all know that we're not far from that, right? We're not far from that at all. So her anger is fear and insecurity and dread. So don't let this be a rift between the two of you. Talk about it. And let her express her thoughts and ideas. Well, what do you want to do? What would you do? What do you think would help, and why do you think it would help? And let her have an expression, and you also. Because your choice to not look at it is also fear. See, we're very fear-driven beings, aren't we? We choose to dive in out of fear. We choose not to dive in out of fear. Fear is just... Abhinivesha, one of the great obstacles to yoga, and perhaps the greatest, the fear of death and dying, is the big one. And it's not just the physical death. It's the death of the idea that this could be a peaceful world. It's the death of the idea that people mostly act in ways that are good. It's the death of the idea that an atrocity like that could never happen here. Because if it can happen there, it can happen here. And it inevitably will, eventually, for some reason, whether in our lifetime or not. Because it already has. So talk. Leave the lines of communication open. And be honest. If you're frustrated about the limited amount of help that you can be in a situation, be honest about it. Like, I don't know. If we're honest about our own fear, then it gives other people the ability to be a little bit more honest about theirs. And when fear is not hidden, it's no longer a monster. When fear is no longer hidden, when it's not a taboo subject, then all the harm that fear brings about will be derailed. But it puts the onus on you and on me because we have to be the ones that talk about it. We have to be the ones willing to say, I don't have the answers. And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of afraid of the answers. And in some ways, I'm really afraid of the answers. And from what I've been learning about myself, this is why. I'd be really interested to hear what you think about that. Yeah. I know that wasn't helpful, but yeah.
That's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, helpful sometimes, according to the ego, is to solve a thing, to give a definitive answer. But the heart knows. Yeah. Any other questions or reflections? Are we good? Okay. Let's sit tall. Close the eyes. And make a little bit of a vow to yourself. Just a little one. That you'll at least start considering which stories might be ready to be let go of. Little stories. The little ones that really aren't serving much of a purpose except to irritate, to further limit, and to disillusion the truth. And just vow to let a little something go every day until there's so much space inside of you that peace can flourish, love can flourish, and the truth can be known. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om, and then we'll chant the All Beings mantra for any being in this world who is currently suffering, and for those who are especially suffering because of war, because of violences. We'll chant that mantra for them. Breathing in. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. May all beings everywhere find peace, know peace, and be peace. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather with each and every one of you. I pray that you have a very blissful rest of your day. And just remember, that you make a difference in this world. The peace within your own heart has the capacity to heal so much, so much. But we have to be the courageous ones. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be willing to walk the walk, to speak the words, to remain silent sometimes. Somebody has to be willing to do it differently, and we can't put it off on other people. It has to be us, to whatever degree it can be. Yeah. If you haven't had brunch yet, enjoy, because it looks so good. And thank everybody down in the kitchen for taking their time, largely volunteers, to support a wonderful meal for you today. And I'll see you all in April. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a lovely time for sure. We were up all night for Shivaratri, right? Ian was here. We were up all night for Shivaratri. I thought I got 4 hours of sleep, but I only got 3 yesterday. And so I was going to go to sleep early tonight so that I could be well rested for the airport today. And so I ended up staying up, packing, doing last minute things. And I thought I got 4 hours of sleep last night. But then my daughter said, it was daylight savings time, Mom. So I got 3. So I'm humored by this. You know, it's a story. I'm humored by this. And I'm thinking, I'm going to sleep really well on the plane. We'll see. Yeah.
So today's the flight?
Today, yeah. We're going to leave it here at about 3, and then our flight leaves at 6:30. So, yeah. And then I'll be back on the 29th. So, yeah. So have a great March, everybody. Enjoy.
You too.
Thank you. Very good.
Thanks.